Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week, and if you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment down below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. For today's tutorial, we're making a really cute top that's part crop top, part bralette, sprinkled with a dash of halter magic for a beach-ready classic. Speaking of, whether if you're looking for beach-ready makes or something to snuggle up in when it's cold, you are in the right place. We have hundreds of modern crochet tutorials and patterns, with even more dropping twice weekly, so consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a big thumbs up if you like it, or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now it's time to get on the show, so without further ado. For this project, any category 4 yarn will work, but I used a total of 80 grams of yarn, and that's 175 yards if you're stateside. As for tools, a 5 and 6 millimeter hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order, and enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us if you'd rather go to a music festival or a concert. I prefer concerts because there's designated seats, so I don't need to elbow anyone too hard. Details for the giveaway down below. We're using 4 stitches for this project, and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, single crochet, half double crochet, and double crochet. This tutorial is made for size small, but you can adjust it for your size, and we explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting this top started, we're all going to grab our category 4 yarn and make a slip knot. Then we're all going to grab our 5 millimeter hook and start off by making a chain the height that we'd like for our bottom band to be. So I'd like for mine to be roughly 2 inches or 5 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 8. Now that we have our chain, we're going to get started on row 1. Start by blocking off that last chain and do a chain 1. That chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Into the chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, insert with a slip stitch, so yarn over, gently pull through both loops on our hook. Make sure we're not tugging too tightly after every stitch, otherwise the following row will be too tight to work into. Again, into that next chain, insert, yarn over, pull through 2, again, insert, yarn over, pull through 2. Continue with 1 slip stitch into every chain. Our row 1 is now complete. Getting started on row 2, we're going to chain 1 and flip. Insert our hook into the last stitch, in through that back loop or the loop that's furthest away from us. Then yarn over and pull through everything on our hook, still remembering to pull through gently. Again, into that next stitch, insert in through that back loop, yarn over, pull through everything. Continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Then at the end of the row, chain 1, flip our work and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch again, and that's it. We're all going to continue to repeat this row with no increases and no decreases until we now have a portion that can stretch, because remember this portion does have a decent amount of stretch to it, from mid-underarm over to the side of the base of our neck. Now we do want to be placing this still at our underbust, so roughly where an underwire would be. We just want to make sure that it can stretch over to the side of the base of the neck. Then I'll meet you back right after an odd number row that is in multiples of 3. I've just completed the first portion of my bottom band. I have a total of 21 rows. This width is roughly 3 inches or 8 centimeters, unstretched. Now we're going to get started on the increase portion. But before we get that started, we are going to want to insert our stitch marker into the edge of that last row just so we know where the increases are going to start. Now to get started on the following row's increases, we're going to start with a chain 2. That first chain is going to count as a stitch for the following row. That second chain is our turning chain, and flip our work. Starting with the second chain from our hook, with a back loop slip stitch, so per usual, and from here continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So as a really quick tip, this row should have 1 more stitch than our previous row. We're at the end of our first increase row. Just to do the increases again, we're going to chain 1, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. We have now just completed that row, and this row shouldn't have any increases or decreases. The following row, to do our increase again, we're going to chain 2 and flip, starting with the second chain from our hook's back loop, insert with our first back loop slip stitch, and continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and that's it. From here, continue to repeat our 2 previous rows until we now have a portion that can stretch from mid-underarm over to mid-chest. Then I'll meet you back right after an odd number row to do the middle row and then complete the waistband from there. We are back. The increased portion of our bottom band is complete. I have a total of 29 rows. My width is roughly 4.5 inches or 11 centimeters. Now we're all going to do our middle row, which is just going to be a back loop slip stitch row. No increases, no decreases. So what we're going to do is chain 1, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. We have just completed our middle row, and before we get started on the decrease side of our bottom band, we do want to make sure that we're inserting a stitch marker into the top of that middle row. Now what we're going to do from here, chain 1, flip our work. Put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, leaving the last 2 stitches. We've made our way up, leaving the last 2 stitches. Now to do our decrease, insert your hook into that second to last back loop, pull through. Also into that last back loop. When we have 3 loops on our hook, yarn over, gently pull through all 3, and that is our decrease. To do our following row, chain 1, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Then at the end of this row, just to do the decrease together once more, chain 1, flip your work, put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, leaving the last 2. We've just made our way back up, leaving our last 2 stitches. To do our decrease together, into that second to last back loop, pull through, into that last back loop, pull through all 3 of those loops. From here, continue to repeat our 2 previous rows until we have the same amount of rows as these increased rows that we have on this side, not including our middle row. Once we do, I'll meet you back. We are back. We have just completed the decrease portion of our bottom band. Now from here, we're going to be doing back loop slip stitch rows with no increases and no decreases for the same amount of rows that we had on this side of our bottom band. Now, just as a really quick tip, our following row, we're going to be putting 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. And for the following row, we do want to make sure that we're inserting a stitch marker into the top of that row to match this stitch marker right here. But like I said, continue with our back loop slip stitch rows with no increases and no decreases. Once we have the same amount of rows as these rows over here, I will meet you back. The bottom band for my front panel is now complete. I have a total of 57 rows, and we do want to make sure that we're now inserting a stitch marker into the first row that we ever made, and at the top of our last row as well to mark off that this is the front panel. From here, we can continue to work into our back panel's bottom band. So all we're going to do is chain 1, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. The back panel won't have any increases or decreases, so just continue to do our back loop slip stitch rows with no increases and no decreases for the same amount of total rows that we have for the front panel. So I will be doing an additional 57 rows. Now we do want to make sure just into the top of the following row we are inserting a stitch marker into the top of that row as well, so that we know that that's where the back panel starts. But once we have the entirety of the back panel bottom band completed, I'll meet you back. The back panel portion of my bottom band is complete. Before we move on, we all want to make sure we're inserting our stitch marker into the top of our last row so we know where the beginning and the end of our back panel starts and ends, and also into the middle row. It should be into the same side row as the front panel, so I went ahead and inserted my stitch marker into there as well. It is my 28th row. Now from here we can seam everything up. So we're going to fold our work in half, making sure that nothing's twisted. Then we're going to insert our hook into the bottom corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. Then we're going to pull everything through and do a chain up of 1 to secure. And now we're going to do an outside loop slip stitch seam to make it look like another back loop slip stitch row. So finding that first stitch into the front panel, insert only in through that front loop. Next stitch into the back panel, insert only in through that back loop. Then yarn over, pull through everything. Again, into that next stitch into the front panel, insert only into that front loop. Next stitch into the back panel, insert only into that back loop. Then yarn over, pull through all 3. Continue on with this, making our way all the way up. Since we are working up towards the point of the front panel, we aren't going to do a chain up of 1 and cut, because then we can just work straight into the single crochet row from there. Now we have just completed our side seam. Now we're going to single crochet along the top of our piece, and the top is going to be where the point of the front panel is. So what we're all going to do from here is simply chain 1, and put 1 single crochet into every side row. And we do want to make sure that we're still inserting our stitch markers into the same side rows once we reach them. So working into our first side row, which is this one for me. I am going to take out that stitch marker for now, but what I'm going to do is find the top of that row, insert into that top loop, insert with 1 single crochet, and I'm going to insert my stitch marker into the top of that stitch. Then from here, this is my following side row, which is my divot. I'm going to find that top loop and insert with 1 single crochet. Let's do this again. This raised row is my following side row, so find that top loop and single. This divot is my following side row, so find that top loop and single. Now continue on with this, making our way all the way up and around, making sure we are inserting our stitch markers into the same stitches. And also, once when the single crochet row is complete and we have slip stitched into that chain space, we do want to try this on, just to make sure that this is still fitting the way that we want it to fit, because the single crochet row is going to be as wide as this portion can stretch. So if you try it on, and if it's a little bit too tight, redo some stitches with a looser grip, or if it's too loose, redo some stitches with a tighter grip. So our single crochet row is complete. Now what we're going to do from here is the straps. So making sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up, meaning we're looking at the front of our single crochet row. We're then going to insert our stitch markers into any stitch within the front panel. The front panel is going to be the side with the point, the width that we like for the strap to be away from our middle stitch marker stitch. Now I'd like for my strap width to be roughly just about 1 inch or 2 centimeters. So counting my middle stitch marker stitch, I inserted my stitch marker into the 5th stitch. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I repeated the same thing on the other side. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we're going to get started on the right strap first. Start by inserting your same hook into our right stitch marker stitch. You're going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through and do a chain up of 1. That doesn't count as a stitch, that's just as secure. And put 1 single crochet into every stitch, working towards our middle stitch marker, starting with that same stitch that our chain 1 is in. So in that same first stitch, there is 1 single crochet, 2 for me, 3, and continue until we're worked into our middle stitch marker stitch. Now once we have our first single crochet row completed, all we're going to do is more back loop slip stitch rows. So simply chain 1, flip our work, and then put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Then just continue to repeat that row with no increases and no decreases until this can reach up, remembering that it does have a decent amount of stretch to it, to the middle of the back of our neck. Now once when they're trying this on, just to make sure that we have the right length, what we're going to want to do is try this on, making sure that this portion is still staying right where an underwire would stay. I'll meet you back once when this side is complete, then we can do this other side as well. We are back and I've just completed my strap. Now I have a total of 53 rows. This length is roughly 9 inches or 23 centimeters unstretched. Now we're going to do the same thing on the other side. The only difference is that we're going to be inserting our hook into our middle stitch and working down towards the left stitch marker, just so that the single crochet row shows the front and everything still looks clean. So just like this side, 1 single crochet into every stitch, then back loop slip stitch rows for the same amount of rows that we have on this side. But we don't have to cut right after the last row because we can work straight into the seam together from there. We are back. Both straps are completed and we do need to seam it together. I actually went ahead and already did mine because it is going to be the same seam that we did for the band. So all we're going to do is just press our 2 pieces together, making sure that everything is still flipped right side out, right side up. Do the same outside loop slip stitch seam that we did for the bottom band. Then when we don't have any more stitches left, do a chain up of 1 and cut. Then once we have that completed, we're just going to single crochet on the outside of our band, and then we can get started on the actual cup portion. So to single crochet along the band, we're going to insert our hook into the stitch that we have that's right next to our strap. And then from there, working our way up our band, put 1 single crochet into every side row, making our way all the way back down. Then when we don't have any more stitches left, slip stitch into that next available stitch into the band, and then do a chain up of 1 and cut, and I'll meet you back. So we are back. We have just completed the single crochet row along the edge of our straps. We did do a cut, and now we're going to get started on our cups. We are going to switch out to our 6mm hook. The cups are going to start the same way for every size. So what we're all going to do is make sure the work is still flipped right side out, right side up. Then we're all going to insert our hook into the 3rd stitch that we have that's away from the prep row that we just did within the base. So here's my first available stitch. There's 1, 2, and then 3, and I inserted my hook in through there. I'm going to insert my yarn onto my hook and pull through, and we're all going to start with an increase of 3 half double crochets into the first stitch that we have that's nearest to our strap prep row. So just working our way back towards our strap, there's 1, there's 2, that's my first available stitch. We're all going to insert with 3 half double crochets. So yarn over into that first stitch with 1 half double crochet, into that same exact stitch with a second, same exact stitch with a third. Now connecting it into the strap, what we're going to do is slip stitch into that following stitch into the base. So just into that next available stitch, insert with a slip stitch. Now everyone's row 1 is complete. Now to get started on our row 2, we're going to slip stitch into that following stitch into the base. So just in through there, none of those slip stitches into the base count as a stitch, and flip our work. Now we are going to be doing our Suzette stitches. A Suzette stitch is just 1 single crochet and 1 double crochet into the same stitch. So what we're going to do, finding the first stitch from our row 1, making sure we're not working into those slip stitches into the base, we're going to insert, starting with a single crochet, and then into that same stitch, a double crochet. So yarn over, into that same first stitch, pull through 2, and pull through 2. That is our first Suzette stitch set. Now to close off the row, we should have 2 stitches left for everyone. We're going to be putting 1 half double crochet into that last stitch. So when it comes to doing our Suzette stitches, we are always going to skip that following stitch because that double crochet actually counts as that following stitch. If we work in there, we're accidentally going to be increasing. So what we're going to do is yarn over, and into that last stitch, we're going to insert with a half double crochet. And now to complete everyone's row 2, slip stitch it into the base. Now all we're going to do is just find that next available stitch into the base, insert with a slip stitch, still doesn't count as a stitch, then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next stitch into the base, still doesn't count as a stitch, and flip. So getting started on our row 3. What we're going to do is just do our Suzette stitches until we all have 2 stitches left. That's going to be basically every row from here on out. So what we're going to do is find that first stitch from our previous row, making sure we're not working into any of those slip stitches into the base, and insert with a single and a double. And since this is a row 3, we should all have 2 stitches left. What we're going to do is into that last stitch, an increase of 3 half double crochets. So into that last stitch, insert with 1, insert with a second, and insert with a third half double crochet, and now we're going to connect it into the base. Now just as a really quick tip, whenever we're connecting it into the strap, it is going to be done just a little bit differently versus working into the bottom band. We're going to be connecting it differently into the strap portion because we would like for the top to come to a point instead of curve like how the bottom band is going to. So what we're going to do is count up the next 2 available stitches. So there's 1, there's 2. Into that second stitch into the base, insert with a slip stitch. Then from here, slip stitch into that following stitch into the base to work our way up to the following row. None of the slip stitches into the base count as a stitch, and flip our work. Now getting started on a row 4, we're going to do our Suzette stitch all the way down again until we have 2 stitches. So in that first stitch, making sure we're not working into any of our slip stitches with our first Suzette stitch. Skip a stitch into the next with another Suzette stitch. Now for everyone still, we should all have 2 stitches left. So into that last stitch, insert with an increase of 3 half doubles. So skip the second to last and into the last with 3 half doubles. Now since we're working into the bottom band, what we're going to do is just slip stitch into that next available stitch into the base to connect this row. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next stitch into the base and flip. And now from here, it's just going to be a repeat of this row until we get the cup height that we want. So as a refresher, let's do the following 2 rows, and I'll let you do the rest on your own. We're going to do our Suzette stitch all the way down till we have 2 stitches left. We should all have 2 stitches left. So into that last stitch, an increase of 3 half doubles. Now that we're at the end of our odd number row, we're going to connect it into our strap. So at the end of our odd number rows, we're going to count up the next 2 stitches into the base, slip stitch into that second stitch. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next stitch into the base and flip. And again, do our Suzette stitch till we have 2 stitches left. Then into that last stitch, an increase of 3 half doubles. Our even number row is complete. Connecting it into the bottom band, we're just going to slip stitch into that following stitch into the base to connect this row. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next stitch into the base, flip our work, and repeat. From here, we're going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows until we get the cup height that we want. Once we have the cup height, I'll meet you back along the bottom band, and then we can finish up with our underarm and our back together. So we are back. We have now completed the height portion of our cup. Now I did already do one side just to make sure that I have my numbers all correct for you guys, but I had a total of 14 rows. This height is roughly 4.5 inches or 11 centimeters. Now we're going to get started on our underarm. So what we're all going to want to do is try on our piece, and we're all going to insert our stitch marker into any even numbered stitch from the top of our cup, right where it's closest to our underarm. So for me, it was the 4th stitch from the top, so I inserted my stitch marker into there. Now getting started on the following row, we're going to slip stitch into that following stitch into the base, then work our way up with our Suzette stitches, leaving 4 stitches left right before our stitch marker, then I'll meet you back. We've made our way up with our first underarm row. We should all have 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches left right before our stitch marker. Now we're all going to do a decrease of 3 double crochets. So yarn over. Skip that following stitch and into that third to last, pull through, into that next stitch, pull through, and into that next stitch, which should be the stitch right before our stitch marker, and pull through for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loops on our hook. Then yarn over, pull through the first 4 loops to get 2 loops on our hook, then yarn over, pull through 2. And that is our decrease. We are going to need to decrease into the following row as well, so chain 2 and flip. So the decrease that we're going to be doing whenever we're along the top, working down towards the bottom, is just going to be skipping the first 2 stitches. So we're going to skip 1, skip 2. Into that next stitch, which should be our single crochet from our previous row, we're going to insert with our first Suzette stitch set. And from here, continue with our Suzette stitches till we have 2 stitches left. We've made our way down, leaving the last 2 stitches. Now, since we're at the end of our row, we're just going to close it off with 1 half double crochet to keep this side nice and blunt. Now we're going to connect it into the base. But for this underarm portion and for the rest of the piece, we're going to be connecting it into the base, which is our waistband portion, the same way that we connected it into the strap. So as a refresher, we're going to count up the next 2 available stitches. There's 1, there's 2, and insert with a slip stitch. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next stitch into the base, flip our work, and now it's just going to be a repeat of these 2 previous rows. So making sure that we can all do it together, just do our Suzette stitch all the way down, leaving the last 4 stitches. We made our way all the way down, leaving our last 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches. Now we're going to do a decrease of 3 double crochets, so yarn over, skipping that next stitch into that third to last, pull through, second to last, pull through, and last, pull through. Yarn over, pull through 4, yarn over, pull through 2, and now this row is complete. So just to get started on the following row, chain 2 and flip. Now to do this row's decrease, we're just going to be skipping the first 2 stitches and into the next with our first Suzette stitch set. We're going to continue doing this, making our way all the way down, remembering that the last stitch in this row is just going to be 1 half double crochet. Then connect it into the base the same way that we just did together, so into that second stitch into the base, and continue to repeat these 2 previous rows until we now have an underarm portion that reaches roughly 1 inch underneath our underarm. And then I'll meet you back right after an even number row or along the base, and we can finish up our back panel together. So we are back. I have just completed my underarm portion. Now I have a total of 20 rows, and now we're just going to work in with our back panel portion. The back panel is going to be pretty simple. We're not going to have any increases or decreases. So since we should all be along the bottom, we're going to slip stitch it into that next available stitch into the base, so per usual. Flip our work and then do our Suzette stitch till we have 2 stitches left. Then I'll meet you back. Our first back panel row is nearly finished. We should all have 2 stitches left. So all we're going to do is half double crochet into that last stitch. From here, it's going to be a repeat of this row, like I said, with no increases and no decreases, and we're going to be connecting it into the base the same way that we've been doing for the underarm portion. Continue on with this until we reach our middle stitch marker stitch within the back panel. Once we do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then I'll meet you back. So we are back. I have just made my way all the way across the back portion until I reached my stitch marker stitch within the back, and I did do a chain up of 1 and cut. Now from here, we're going to repeat everything that we did here on the other side. So as you guys can see, I have already finished up both of my cuffs, but it is going to be done exactly the same way. But once we finish up the second side, do not do a chain up of 1 and cut because we can work straight into the seam together from there. And just as a really quick tip, sometimes our row can end into the stitch right before our stitch marker stitch within the back. If that happens, to make sure that we're not missing out on that stitch marker stitch, just do a single crochet row into there, and then I'll meet you back. So now that we have finished up both of our pieces, now we're going to seam up the back. So we're now going to make sure the work is flipped wrong side out. Then we're going to insert our hook into the first stitch into the front and first stitch into the back panel. Then we're going to pull through and do a chain up of 1 to secure. Then we're going to do a single crochet seam. So finding that first stitch into the front panel, insert, first stitch into the back panel, insert, and single crochet. Again, first stitch into the front panel, insert, first stitch into the back panel, insert, and single crochet. And that's pretty much it. We're just going to continue doing this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut. So we are back. Everything is all seamed up, and the next thing we're going to do is a single crochet row along the top of our piece just to clean everything up. So what we're going to do is make sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up. Then insert our hook into the stitch that we have that's nearest to the top of our cup that's within the strap. Then we're going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, and do a chain up of 1 just to secure. And working into the top of our cup first, we should all have just a handful of stitches to work into. For those of you that have my numbers, I have 4 stitches, so I'm just going to start with 4 single crochets, 1 into each. Then once we have our single crochet rows completed, into the top of our underarm rows, we're going to be putting 2 single crochet into every side row. So this is my first side row right over here. I'm going to find that top loop and insert with 2 single crochets. There's 1. Into that same top loop, there's 2. And this is my following side row, so 2 single crochets into the top of this row. We're going to continue on with 2 single crochets into every side row until we have completed working into the top of our underarm portion. Now that we've put 2 single crochets into the top of our underarm portion, working into the back, just 1 single crochet into the top of every row. So this is my first side row right here, find that top loop and insert with 1. This is my following side row, find that top loop and insert with 1 as well. We're going to continue doing this, making our way all the way around. Once we're worked into the top of our underarm rows, again, 2 single crochets into every side row, 1 single crochet into every stitch, then once we're completed, slip stitch into that next available stitch into our single crochet row. Do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then I'll meet you back. And now that our single crochet row is completed, the last thing we're going to do is our top band. So that's going to be fairly simple. We're going to start by making sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up, and we're going to insert our hook into any stitch away from the top of our cup, the width that we'd like for this band to be. Now I'd like for this band to be 1 inch, just like how this strap is, so I've actually inserted my 6mm hook into the 4th stitch away from the single crochet row that we just did on top of our cup. And from here, we're going to pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure, and start with 1 single crochet into every stitch, starting with that same stitch that our chain 1 is in. Now that we put 1 single crochet into every stitch, we should be right where our base is, which is that single crochet row. So find that next available stitch into the base, insert with a slip stitch. That slip stitch doesn't count as a stitch. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next stitch into the base, flip our work and put 1 back loop, slip stitch into every stitch. Then at the end of that row, chain 1, flip our work. Put 1 back loop, slip stitch into every stitch again, and I'll meet you back at the end of our row 3. We are back and we're at the end of our row 3. Now we're going to connect it in the base. It is going to be done the same way as our previous row, so just insert your hook into that next available stitch with a slip stitch, still doesn't count as a stitch. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next stitch in the base, flip our work, and repeat. We're going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows with no increases and no decreases, making our way all the way around. When you don't have any more stitches left to work into, I'll meet you back to seam it into the strap. So I've just made my way all the way around with my back loop slip stitch rows. Now we're going to seam it to the strap. So how we're all going to get this started, since we all should have ended along the outer edge, into the strap portion, we're all going to start by counting up the first few available stitches for the same amount of stitches that we made for the strap. So since I did a total of 4 stitches per row, here's my first available stitch. I'm going to count up 1, 2, 3, 4. Insert my hook into that 4th stitch, also into our working yarn, and making sure that our work is flipped wrong side out because we want the seam to be along the inside. We're going to pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure. And now we're going to do the same single crochet seam that we did for the back of our piece. So just to do the first one, find that first stitch into the front panel, insert, find that next stitch into the back panel, insert, and single crochet, and that's it. Continue doing this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut. And now that we have our seam completed, we are all done. Last thing we're going to have to do is just weave in all of our ends. And there you have it, y'all. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Catch you on the next one. Bye!